You're holding a cell phone that isn't supposed to exist, and a man in an orange jumpsuit is offering you more for it than you make in a week. The phone is nothing, a cheap, prepaid thing, smaller than a deck of cards. But the way he looks at you, calm, patient, certain, tells you he already knows what your answer is going to be. He knew before you did. You're a corrections officer, 6 years on the job. You've broken up riots in the chow hall, pulled shanks out of mattresses, and stood post on the worst tier in the facility while men twice your size tested you every single day. You wear a badge that gives you total authority over 400 human beings. You decide when they eat, when they shower, when they see daylight. You hold absolute power over them, and you make $38,000 a year doing it. That number is the whole story. That number is why you're standing here right now, holding a phone, doing the math instead of writing him up. Your power doesn't pay your rent. Your authority doesn't cover your kids' daycare. Every morning, you walk into a building full of men who have nothing, and every night, you drive home to a life that isn't much better. The bars don't just keep them in. Some days it feels like they keep you in too. You think about your father when you think about this job. 26 years he wore a uniform, a different uniform. A beat cop in a city that chewed him up and handed him a pension that barely covers his bills now. He told you the work would mean something. He told you that standing on the right side of the line was worth whatever it cost. You believed him. You took the academy seriously. You graduated near the top. And 6 years later, you're standing on the right side of the line, broke, exhausted, and holding a contraband phone like it's the first warm thing you've touched in months. His name is Reyes, mid-level guy, connected, the kind of inmate who never raises his voice because he never has to. He runs half the tier through people who owe him. He tells you the phone gets him 5 minutes with his daughter at night. And he says it so quietly, so reasonably, that for a second you forget he's serving 14 years for things you read about in the file. He just wants to hear his kid's voice. You used to believe that was a thing worth protecting. You tell yourself it's harmless, a phone, not drugs, not a weapon, just a man calling his daughter. And the $400 he's offering would cover the daycare bill that's 3 weeks late. You slide the phone into your boot. The whole thing takes 8 seconds. You wait to feel like a criminal. What you feel instead is relief. The cash comes the next day, folded into a commissary list, passed through the slot like it's nothing. $400 in worn 20s. You don't sleep that night, but not from guilt. You lie awake waiting for the knock. The investigation. The lieutenant calling you into the office.
Nothing comes.
3 days pass, and the building runs exactly the same as it always has. You got away clean. That's the part nobody warns you about. Getting away with it the first time is what kills you. The days after are strange. You walk the tier the same way you always have. You run count. You write up the same petty violations. You do every part of the job exactly the way you've done it for 6 years. Except now, there's a second frequency running underneath everything. A hum only you can hear. You look at the other officers differently. You wonder how many of them are running on that same frequency.
You wonder if they look at you and see anything at all.
The answer is no. That's the terrifying part. You look exactly the same. You spent 6 years locking up men who look like neighbors, like fathers, like the guy who fixes your car. You always thought you'd be able to tell the dirty ones by looking. You can't tell. You couldn't even tell about yourself. Your partner on the tier is a man named Daniel. 9 years in, 2 kids, the kind of officer who still reads the policy manual like it means something. He talks about the job the way your father talked about church. He's the officer you used to be, back when the badge felt heavier than the paycheck.
You've worked beside him for 3 years. He's pulled you out of 2 fights. He trusts you completely. That trust is going to become the heaviest thing you carry. And right now, you don't even feel the weight of it. The second request comes faster than the first. Reyes doesn't ask for phones anymore. He asks for cigarettes, then for Suboxone strips folded thin as paper, then for the names of which lockers get tossed and when.
He's not paying you for favors now. He's putting you on a payroll. 800 a drop, then 1200. You learn the rhythm of it. Which gate camera has a blind spot? Which sergeant doesn't pat down his own officers? How to walk past the metal detector with your hands loose and your face bored. You get good at it. That's the thing nobody tells you about being a fraud in a uniform. You get better. While the lazy officers cut corners and the burned out ones stopped caring years ago, you treat every drop like your life depends on it, because it does. You memorize the camera rotation. You time the sergeant's smoke breaks. You build a little system inside the big system, and the little system runs cleaner than the one you're paid to enforce. The paranoia that used to keep you up at night becomes the thing that keeps you free. Within 4 months, you're clearing more under the table than your actual salary. You catch up on rent. You pay off the daycare. You buy your kid the bike she circled in the catalog. And watching her ride it down the driveway, you feel like a father again, instead of a man drowning. Your girlfriend says you seem lighter lately. She has no idea you've become exactly the kind of person you spent 6 years locking up. The irony tastes like metal in the back of your throat, and you swallow it down every single day. Daniel notices things. Small things. The kind only a partner catches. He asks why you always volunteer for the C block shakedowns. He mentions that Reyes seems awful comfortable lately for a man on a maximum tier. He brings up the new sneakers you wore in last week, the watch, the way you stopped picking up overtime but seemed to have more money than you did when you were grabbing every double they offered. He says it light, like a joke, but his eyes hold on you a half second too long. You laugh it off. You're good at that now. Lying to Daniel is easier than it should be. And that's the thing that scares you when you're honest with yourself, which is less and less. Then the line moves, the way it always does. Reyes tells you the next package isn't strips. It's a phone again, but this one has a number programmed in, and a name, and instructions you're not supposed to read but do. You're not moving comfort items anymore. You're moving the machinery of an organization that runs from inside these walls out into the streets. And you know exactly what that means. You tell yourself it's the same hand motion, the same 8 seconds, the same blind spot on the same camera. You tell yourself a lot of things. The package goes in, the money changes with the cargo. It's 2,000 a drop now. Then 2,500. Cash you can't deposit and can't explain. So you start keeping it in a coffee can in the back of a closet your girlfriend never opens. You count it sometimes when she's asleep. Not because you need to. Because the number is the only thing that makes the weight in your chest feel survivable. You tell yourself you'll stop when the can is full. You tell yourself a number. You hit the number and you keep going. Because by then, stopping isn't a decision you're allowed to make anymore. 2 weeks later, a kid on B tier overdoses on his bunk. 19 years old. In for a stolen car. 90 days left on his sentence. The strips that stopped his heart came in the same way yours come in. You don't know if they were yours. You'll never know. That's worse than knowing. You stand at the rail watching them carry him out under a sheet, and Daniel stands beside you, and he says, quiet, almost to himself, that something is rotten on this block, and he's going to find out what. He doesn't look at you when he says it. He doesn't have to. You go home that night, and you stand in the doorway of your daughter's room and watch her sleep. and you do the math you've been avoiding. The kid on B tier had 90 days left. The kid on B tier had a mother who filed for visitation every month. The kid on B tier was somebody's reason to keep going, and now he's a body under a sheet. And the line between you and that sheet is 8 seconds and a coffee can full of money. You tell yourself you didn't do it. You tell yourself you don't know whose strips they were. But you know the system that killed him. Because you are the system that killed him. You should stop. You know you should stop. But stopping isn't a thing you control anymore. That's the part you didn't see coming, back when it was just a phone in your boot. The day Reyes asked you to walk in cigarettes, he owned the phone you walked in the month before. He owns the strips. He owns the gate codes you gave up and the cameras you mapped, and every $20 bill folded into every commissary list. The first favor was you doing him a kindness. Now every favor is him reminding you what he can prove. You don't work for the state anymore. You work for a man in a cage, and the cage was never really his.
It was always going to be yours.
You try to pull back. You skip a drop. You tell Reyes the heat is too high. Internal affairs is sniffing. You need a month. He smiles at you through the bars. That patient, certain smile. And he asks how your daughter likes a new bike. He says it gentle, almost warm. He asks if she still takes the same route to school, the one past the gas station on the corner. He doesn't make a threat. He doesn't have to make a threat. The question is the threat. And he watches it land. And his smile never changes.
And you understand fully, for the first time, that the walls you've been standing guard over your whole career are around you now. And the man you thought you controlled is holding the key. The pressure breaks you down in pieces. You stop sleeping for real this time. You lose 15 pounds. Your hands shake during count, and a sergeant asks if you've got the flu, and you say, yeah, the flu. And he believes you, because your face is grey and you're sweating through your shirt. Your girlfriend asks if you're sick, and you tell her it's stress, the job, the overtime that isn't even real anymore. And she believes you, because people believe what they want to believe, and what she wants is for you to be okay. You start checking your mirrors on the drive home. You start thinking the lieutenant looks at you a beat too long. You sweep the closet twice a week to make sure the coffee can hasn't moved. The paranoia tells you everyone knows. The truth is, only one person on the outside knows, and he's the one signing your paychecks now. The investigation comes from a direction you didn't expect. Not the warden, not the cameras. Daniel. He'd been pulling the overdose file, cross-referencing your shift logs against the day's product showed up on the tier. Building it the same patient way he builds everything. He came to you first. Of course he did. He sat you down in the break room, closed the door, and told you he'd been watching for 2 months, and the pattern was too clean to be coincidence. And he needed you to tell him he was wrong. He gave you the chance. His voice was steady, but his eyes were begging. Tell me I'm wrong. You looked at the man who pulled you out of 2 fights, who trusted you with his back every shift for 3 years, and you told him he was wrong. You made it convincing. You leaned into the grief about the kid, the stress about money, the divorce that wasn't even happening. You laid it on thick because you knew Daniel cared about you. And caring is the easiest thing in the world to exploit. He wanted to believe you, so he did, because that's what partners do. He nodded and let it go, and went back to work and coached his kids' game that weekend. You'd spend the last honest thing you had left. It didn't hold. Daniel kept pulling threads, quiet, careful. And a thread led him to a CO on another shift who'd been doing the same thing you were. And that CO, when cornered, gave up everyone to save himself, including a name he'd heard Reyes mention. Yours. The investigation went state. Then it went federal, because the phone you walked in with a number programmed into it connected this tier to a distribution network in 3 counties. They came for you on a Tuesday. 2 agents and the warden in an office with the blinds drawn.
They had your shift logs. They had the other CO's statement. They had everything except a confession, and they offered you a deal to get it. Flip on Reyes. Wear a wire. Help them map the whole operation from the inside out. Or eat 20 years in a federal cell, which for a former corrections officer is its own kind of death sentence. And you know that better than anyone alive. You've watched what happens to cops who go inside. You've stood guard over it. You sat in that chair and you thought about running.
You thought about the coffee can and a border and a version of your life where you just disappear. You thought, for one long, cold minute, about the other way out. The one that ends in a parking lot with your service weapon. The one that means your daughter never has to read your name in the paper. Your hand was steady when you thought about it. That's what scared you most. Then you thought about her face, about how she'd remember you, about the difference between a father in prison and a father who chose the parking lot. And something quieter than the fear asked you a simple question. What if you just stopped running? You took the deal. It wasn't a good deal. It was the only deal. The next 3 months were the worst of your life. You walked the same tier, played the same dirty CO, with the recorder taped against your ribs every shift. You documented the drops, the names, the gate codes you'd sold. You built the case against Reyes brick by brick, using your own body as the foundation. He suspected nothing. You'd been lying to everyone you knew for so long that lying to him felt like breathing.
He trusted you because he thought you were just like him. A man who chose money over everything. He had no idea you'd already chosen something else. Too late to save yourself, but maybe in time to mean something. Daniel was read into the operation after your confession. The man who almost caught you became the man making sure you didn't get killed wearing a wire on a maximum tier. He was your handler now. Every night you handed over the recordings and he debriefed you. Clinical, professional, asking operational questions and getting operational answers. But sometimes after the recorder clicked off, he'd just look at you. And it wasn't anger. And it wasn't pity. It was disappointment. The kind that comes from a man who believed in you longer than you deserved. One night you asked him why he didn't just turn you in himself the day he knew. Why he gave you the chance to lie. He was quiet a long time. Then he said he'd spent weeks telling himself there was an explanation that didn't end with you being exactly what you turned out to be. He said the hardest part wasn't finding out you were dirty. It was realizing he'd been making excuses for you the whole time. You didn't have an answer for that. You just nodded and went home to a bed you couldn't sleep in. The takedown happened on a count day, when every inmate was locked in and the tier was still. They pulled Reyes from his cell in front of everyone. He didn't fight it. He looked across the block straight at you, and you watched the exact moment he understood. He didn't yell. He just smiled. That same patient, certain smile. The smile of a man who should have seen it coming, and was almost impressed that he didn't. The case put 11 people away. Reyes got another 20 years stacked on what he was already serving. You testified for 2 days, and you burned every bridge you had left in that courtroom. When it was done, there was no thank you, no commendation. You surrendered your badge in a conference room with 3 witnesses, and Daniel was one of them. He watched you set it on the table. 9 years of his integrity and 6 years of your failure, ending with a piece of metal on laminate. He shook your hand once, firm, brief, and walked out without looking back. You signed papers that stripped your pension and barred you from law enforcement for life. You took a felony plea down to time served and 5 years probation,
The deal you earned by wearing the wire. The local news ran a story about the dirty corrections officer who turned informant. They used your academy photo. You looked so young in it. So sure you'd be one of the good ones. You're 41 years old now, working nights as a security guard at a distribution warehouse 2 states away. Minimum wage, checking trailers and watching cameras, the lowest rung of the same ladder you fell off of.
Some nights when the floor is empty, you think about the man you could have been. The one who wrote Reyes up that first day and slept fine and retired broke and honest like your father did. Broke and honest looks like a fortune from where you're standing. Sometimes you think about the coffee can too. It went to restitution, all of it. Every 20 you ever counted in the dark. You think about the version of your life where you kept it, where you ran, where you're on a beach somewhere instead of a warehouse floor at 3 in the morning.
Then you remember the kid on B tier with 90 days left, and you remember your daughter's face.
And you know that she might not call much anymore, but at least she doesn't have to visit you through glass. Daniel made lieutenant last year. You know because you looked him up. The career you were supposed to have. The one you traded for a phone in your boot and a bike in the driveway. He earned it. He always deserved a better partner than the one he got. You destroyed your badge, your pension, every relationship that ever meant anything.
You spend your nights now on the right side of a locked door, watching it the way you used to watch men through bars.
Except now, you understand both sides of it. You're still here, still standing, still choosing every single shift not to become what you were. That isn't redemption. You stopped believing in redemption a long time ago. But it's a start. And some nights, a start is the only thing keeping you on your feet. If you're enjoying these stories and want to support the channel, you can join the community by hitting the join button below any video.